All right, this is lesson 2.6, linear word problems, tables and graphs. Our Khan Academy skills for Math 1 are from Unit 4, forms of a linear equation, or forms of linear equations, skills 2 and 6. Your objective is that you should be able to interpret linear function word problems from tables and graphs. And I made a note here. For word problems, you need to make sure that you explain your answer. And what I mean by that is specify your units. Don't just tell me 7, tell me 7 hours or 7 meters or whatever it is in the context of your word problem. So I have a table here. It's really just a reference for you to look at. The y value is going to be the right side of your table, or an outcome based on x. In a previous video, I let you know that y is called the dependent variable because it depends on x. X is going to be the left side of your table, and that is referred to as the independent variable. It's independent of y, but it has an effect on y. Our y-intercept, we know that's when x is 0, or our x-intercept, that's when y is 0, but we can interpret this in word problems as the y-intercept being like the start or the beginning, or this one isn't true for all word problems, but especially if you have something like decreasing or going towards 0 somehow, once that y quantity hits 0, that's your x-intercept, it could be interpreted as the end or the finish of something happening in a word problem. And just a reminder, the slope, in a word problem, if you see words like per or speed, each, or something's changing at a constant rate, that's your slope. Okay? So let's do example 1 together. The ground floor of a tower has a very high ceiling, and the residential floors above it each have a constant smaller height. Okay? They give us a table, and it says the table compares the floor number and the height of its ceiling above the ground in meters. The ground floor is floor 0, and floor 1 and up are the residential floors. Okay, so looking at this table, it does not include floor 0. There's no 0 here in the x column, so we can't just look at the table and tell what the y-intercept is, or in this case, the height of the ground floor. I know we've gone over a word problem strategy that I like to use in previous videos, and part of that word problem strategy is to circle the question. We're not going to do that here because all the questions there's 4 of them, and they're all here at the bottom. But we should know that the ground floor is floor 0, has a constant height for all the other floors. One good strategy here, and I'd like you to use this for the rest of this section, is to label what do these questions mean. So when it's asking what is the height of the ground floor, well, that's at floor 0. That's when our x is 0. So we're looking for a y-intercept there. The second question, what's the rate? Well, that's a slope. And how tall is the 30th floor? They're giving us a value for the floors. They're giving us an x value of 30. We need to find the matching y value, the height. And then what floor is 121.2 meters high? Well, that's kind of the inverse of the last question. They're giving us an x value, and we need to find the matching, they're giving us a y value, and we need to find the matching x value. Okay, so if you remember from the previous video, if we have a table that doesn't give us any intercepts, our best bet is to calculate the slope first. So I do that here. Remember, the slope is the change in y over the change in x. So I'm going to subtract, I picked these 2 points, by the way. So I subtract the 2 y coordinates, 54 minus 31.6, and then I subtract the x coordinates in the same order, 15 minus 8. If you want a challenge, pick different points. You should get the same slope of 3.2. All right. Now that we have the slope, 3.2, Remember at the beginning of the video, I said specify your units. So that's 3.2, it's a change in y over change in x. Y is in meters, and x is measured in floors. So we're changing at a rate of 3.2 meters per floor. Now let's find the y-intercept. Since we have an equation, well, we can get an equation. Since we have a slope, I'm going to use point slope form because I can pick any point I want from the table and I know the slope. So I chose to plug in the first point. I plugged in 8 for x and I plugged in 31.6 for y. I know my slope is 3.2. And then if I go ahead and distribute that 3.2 and then add 31.6 to both sides, I will end up with an equation in slope-intercept form. So this is y equals mx plus b form. I can pick out my b value or my y-intercept very quickly this way. My y-intercept is b. It's going to be 6 meters. All right. So then the third question asks, how tall is the 30th floor? Remember, 30 is an x value. So if I plug in 30 for x, I can multiply 3.2 times 30 and then add 6. And I'll find a y value of 15.6. Remember, y is the height, so that's 15.6 meters. The 30th floor is 15.6 meters tall. And the last question, we're given a y value. So we can plug in, back into this equation here, we can plug in 121.2 for y. I do that here. And then solve for x. I can subtract 6 from both sides and then divide both sides by 3.2. And I will find that x is 36. So I can answer my question now. When y is 121.2, or when the height is 121.2, that means x is 36. So we're talking about the 36th floor. Okay, so I want you to try problem 1 about an engine, its rotation speed, and its temperature. Remember to think about what each question means for practice problem 1, and then come back and check your work. All right. So they give us another table. In this table, x, the independent variable, represents the engine's rotation speed. So it's not actually the rotations, like the number of rotations, it's how many rotations per or cycles per second, right? And the y values are showing the temperature for each speed of the engine's rotation. Okay, and again, we've got 4 questions here. This first one is talking about a change for each cycle, so that's a slope. The second one's asking for the engine temperature at rest. At rest means it's not spinning at all, so x is 0. The third question is asking the speed of the engine's rotation when the temperature is 31, so it gives us a y coordinate. We need to find an x coordinate. And the last question gives us a speed, 28 rotations per second, and so we have to find a y coordinate to match it. All right. Let's look at example 2. We just finished problems that gave us a table, but this section is also about graphs. And so this time we'll be given a graph, and in my opinion, graphs tend to be easier because they communicate more information. This should say a battery, not a batter, is being charged. So the percentage of the battery's capacity that is charged as a function of time in minutes is graphed. So we have our graph here. The x-axis is labeled. It says time in minutes, And it's important that graphs are scaled. So if you're ever making your own graph, make sure you put numbers here so I know what scale you're using. Same thing for the y-axis. It's labeled, it's the battery's capacity or percentage charged, and it's also scaled, so it goes from 0% all the way up to 100%. Reading these questions, at what rate is the battery charged? Well, it's talking about a rate, so we need to find the slope of this line. The second question, how long till the battery is fully charged? Well, if it's fully charged, that means it's at 100% capacity, which 100 is a y value. So it's asking us what's the x value when the battery's at 100%, or what time, how long does it take to get to 100%? The third question, what was the percent of battery before charging? So if it's saying before charging, that means the time it's spent charging is 0. So this is asking us, you could think of it as a point like I wrote. You could also think of it as the y-intercept. The last question, after 15 minutes, what was the percent of battery? So this is giving us an x-coordinate. We need to find the y-coordinate that matches 15. Okay, so switch that over. Our slope, you need to pick a lattice point, and it actually looks like all of these are lattice points, so you can pick different ones. I notice that if I go up 2 boxes and over 2 boxes, I hit 2 lattice points. So I'm going to draw that slope triangle. It's important to note here that it's not 2 over 2. That's not the slope because it's scaled differently. Even though we went up 2 boxes, we went from 40 to 50. So that is a rise not of 2, but of 10. And then the run, even though it looks like we went to the right 2 boxes, we went from an x-coordinate of 0 to an x-coordinate of 5. So our slope is 10 over 5, which is 2. And that's our slope. Remember to include your units. We went up 2% for every minute. The second question asks how long until the battery is fully charged. So fully charged means 100%. So we can go to 100 on the x-axis, follow that all the way to our line, our blue line here, and then trace it all the way down. And so that point is 30, 100. So it's 30 that would go in that unknown value. It would take 30 minutes to fully charge the battery. The third question, what was the percent of battery before charging? Well, when x is 0, y is 40. So we started at 40% charge before we even plugged the phone in. The last question, after 15 minutes, what was the percent of the battery? And it's 70% because we look at 15 minutes. There's our point on the line, and the y-coordinate of that point is 70. Go ahead and try it for problem 2. Again, please make sure to write down what you think each question is asking in terms of slope or x or y coordinates, things like that, and then come back and check your work when you're finished. All right, so Zane is exploring inside a volcano. It doesn't seem very safe, but I went ahead and drew a picture. You don't have to, but the dotted line in here represents the inside of the volcano. There's Zane, and he's climbing up to the edge of the volcano. We're calling the edge of the volcano 0, so anything below that would be a negative number. That's why we have all these negative numbers down here to represent Zane's height. Zane's height will be negative because he's under the edge of the volcano. First question's asking for an x-intercept. Second question's asking for a slope. The third question It's asking for a y-intercept. And the last question is telling us to find the x-coordinate when y is 12.5. So for the slope one, I chose to draw this big blue slope triangle because I could deal with whole numbers, 25 over 35. If you saw this lattice point, that works too. Just be careful and make sure you know what the rise over run is. It would be 12.5 over 17.5. Either way, if you reduce it, you'll get a slope of 5/7. All right, that's problem 2. And that is the end of lesson 2.6. Don't forget to ask a question or make up your own question, and I will see you in class.